Hi, Scanner Group. I'm Ryan Mallory.
And I'm Jared Banry.
Welcome to the show. Today we're going to meet with Chuck Glose, and Chuck is a firefighter locally, and he also owns a business that has to do with trauma wound care. We wanted to learn more about that, so let's go to Chuck.
Awesome.
Yeah. You've been a firefighter for quite a while. I think you said since 1998, is that right?
Correct, yeah. I started off in Hendersonville, Tennessee with Hendersonville Fire Department.
Wow. No kidding. And military service, those kind of things?
I did, yeah. I was in the Army, Fort Campbell, the 101st Infantryman.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah. We wanted to have you on the show today to talk a little bit about fire stuff for sure with all that experience. And you also have a business. Tell us about that.
I do. So I have Dynamic Rescue Solutions, and it's based off of Tactical Emergency Casualty Care, which is point of injury trauma care, so gunshot wounds, stabbings, any kind of blast or anything like that. But it's also relevant towards any type of traumatic injury where you've got blood coming out or holes in places that shouldn't have holes.
So immediate care, things like, well, I guess maybe carrying over from both your service in the Army and what they do on maybe the battlefield when they have to prepare a wound to get just immediate triage type stuff.
Exactly, and that's where the treatment modalities came from. In 93, after the Battle of Mogadishu, there was a SEAL officer and a SEAL corpsman that were looking at the care that was being provided in battle, and they were basing it off of the same guidelines that civilian paramedics were using. So they're going into somebody that's been shot and immediately going into holding C-spine as opposed to treating the bleeds or anything like that. So they set up a 42-member committee, and it was, SEAL corpsmen, trauma surgeons, special forces medics, pararescue, and stuff like that. And they looked at what do people die from? And of all that they die from, what's treatable pre-hospital? And then also, what do they die from fastest? So they looked at all that, and essentially there's three wounds that we can deal with pre-hospital. So one is extenuating extremity hemorrhage, so bleeding out from the arms, the legs, or what we call junctional areas, which are the axillary region or in the groin. So where you have a compressible hemorrhage where you can get pressure against a bleeding artery. The other is the occluded airway. So if there's trauma to the jaw or swelling in the neck or whatever the case may be, how to open the airway. And the last thing is tension pneumothorax prevention. So holes going into the pleural space of the lung space, basically.
The torso for us lay people.
So yeah, so you have a hole going into the chest, and you cover that with a chest seal. And if it's progressed to the point where you have pressure being exerted against that lung space and it'll kink the aorta, we'll actually decompress it with a needle. So those are the three main treatments. It's rapid, and again, that's what you're going to die from in battle. That's treatable pre-hospital.
And it's really to make that life last until they can get to the hospital.
Exactly.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so there are different things that your company sells and teaches and those kind of things. How does it relate to what your business does?
Okay. So with that, again, I've been teaching the fire departments and law enforcement locally since probably, 2011, somewhere around there, 2009 for our fire department, and then extended out from there. And just in 2019, I started teaching it to civilians as well.
Okay.
So it's been, and again, it doesn't have to be, it's not really a big difference if you've been shot through your brachial artery or if that's happened from, a fan belt breaking and lacerating you there. There's still the same injury that's going to kill you from that.
Sure.
So that's where it's applicable to that. I had a friend of mine owns a winery that at Two Hawk.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And they had an injury there. We had just been talking about, he's a retired cop.
Okay.
With him. We were talking about getting him trained back up on the trauma care, and later on that day, family member broke a glass and opened a vein in her wrist, and they couldn't get it stopped. And they were like, well, we need to have this training for all of our staff. So I came in and trained the whole staff in that.
That's really cool. I mean, that would make me as a citizen feel a lot better about going to a place that maybe has a crowd here and there. And I've been to Two Hawks several times. That's cool. And if there's ever anything bad happening or a bad injury, staff trained in something like that could definitely save a life even before the police or fire or mercy can get there.
Oh, for sure. And that's the, part of the issue is if you have a significant arterial bleed, most studies show between 3 and 4 minutes, you're done. So you can lose between 2,000 and 2,500 cc's of blood and be potentially fatal. So even if you lose 2,500 cc's of blood and you stop it right then, you may not be able to recover because you're in irreversible shock at that point. So if you think about when an injury occurs, when you call 911, best response time, it may be too late.
Yeah.
So, we've trained law enforcement, and they get there a lot of the times before we do, especially when there's, a shooting or a stabbing. They're going to have to clear the scene.
They have to clear the scene, right?
Right.
We were just talking about that on a podcast we did about medical recently.
Okay, yeah. And Medford PD, we train every year in the TC3 guidelines, and they get a lot of practice with that. And we're seeing more and more officers are on scene, putting on tourniquets. We've had a couple do wound packs, and it's great. And if we can get that care there even faster with the civilians, greater likelihood of saving somebody. And learn to take care of yourself.
And so this gear and these trainings are available to the public too?
Yes, for sure.
That's good to know. I don't want to get into a lot of politics, but we definitely see, on TV and even people I know, whether it be patriotic or from a different thing like Antifa, medics, people that are there because they know there could be some kind of trauma and they don't want anybody to die because they showed up at a protest. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff even possibly.
Yeah. And again, anywhere that there can be an injury, it's good to have the care.
So if I go through your training and I get, is there a certification that's given? So I go through the training. Am I protected under Good Samaritan law if I do something like that?
So again, I'm only going to train people to their scope of practice. And for the lay person, there's things that you can do. So there's a nationwide campaign right now for the Stop the Bleed campaign. And that's placing tourniquets and doing wound packing and stuff like that. And that's going to be under Good Samaritan. If you start decompressing people, it's then you're opening yourself up to liability.
Don't break out the needles.
Definitely don't.
Yeah, makes sense.
So out of curiosity, somebody who's not trained at all in anything medical whatsoever, give me a few first instances just for me and the people, honestly, to know what to do in basic scenarios. So say somebody gets a large gash on their arm and they're bleeding from a main artery. I'd assume that one's a tourniquet. Mm-hmm. But give us maybe some more information on some harder, more likely, also as likely versions of injuries.
One of the first things we have, if you don't have any equipment on you, we can show you how to use body weight to stop a bleed. So for example, like what you said, if you had a laceration down here, you have a blood vessel, so your aorta comes up, and then you have an artery that goes behind your clavicle, comes down to the front of your arm here, and you can literally take your hand and just provide pressure on that. And you're going to look at that bleed and move your hand around until you see the bleeding slow down and then stop, and you can maintain pressure with that. You can also have them lay on their back and then utilize your body weight against that as well. Same thing with the lower extremities, putting pressure, and I could show you where to do it, in the crease where your leg kind of becomes torso, about the midway between that. If you push in that fold, you'll have a sensitive spot, and it takes almost no pressure. And when we get done, I'll show you a video of me doing this on a couple of my guys. And it takes almost no pressure to compress your iliac artery, and you can stop blood flow to the lower extremities. And then there's another one that you can stop blood flow to the entire lower, from your pelvis down, and it's compressing your abdominal aorta. So as your aorta comes down below your rib cage, about 2 to 3 inches above your belly button, you can put fist pressure, or if you put your knee into that. And there was a study done in the military, and it was between 80 and 120 pounds of pressure it took to compress that blood vessel and stop all blood flow to the lower extremities. And when we train with that, we use a Doppler radar, Doppler device, and it measures blood flow, or it can hear blood flow coming through the artery, and we do that, and you can see clearly this actually works and stops blood flow down there.
Like what they use for listening to a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
You hear their heartbeat for the first time when you're a new parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Neat.
Yep. And then we go into also using equipment as well. I think like most police officers now carry tourniquets with them, but there's a lot of other tools that you can use with it. And it's simple stuff. It's literally gauze, tourniquets, and big sticky things.
That's a cool tourniquet. Show us that if you would. But a tourniquet can be a belt and a stick or other things, right?
Yeah, yeah, and if you can, you want to get a commercially made one because you can make an improvised tourniquet. A lot of research done, even with people that practice with them, when you're relying on finding a cloth and something that's strong enough. Exactly. The last study I saw was about a 33% success rate.
Hard to get it stopped,
tourniquets.
and you might hurt them with that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and I'd be more just concerned with it not being able to get the blood flow to stop. So, there's several that have. There's quite a few now, obviously, with how popular tourniquets are. A lot of companies are making them. And there's a lot of research done and testing with them by the DoD, and that's what I follow.
Yeah,
let the guys with the budget do the testing.
Absolutely.
And this one is a cat. It's probably the most commonly used one, and it's fantastic. But again,
so it'll even go around my leg.
Yeah, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and we have to kind of move around to demonstrate that stuff. But we cover how to be successful with this. And I get into a lot of kind of the mindset when you're providing this care. Most people aren't used to, putting your fingers into wounds or causing people a lot of discomfort with medical care. That's a good thing.
It's a necessity, though,
It's
in
a
this
necessity.
case.
The mindset should be it's this or they die, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's looking at the scene, determining what you have, and then making the decision to provide care or not. And what can I do anything for this? And if I can, I just have to do it. And getting comfortable with that.
Comes to mind is the Boston Marathon bombing, and there was an Army veteran that a fellow's legs were practically blown off, and he held two arteries, and they loaded him up, and he held those two arteries clear into the ambulance, and the whole time, and he saved that guy's life by knowing to hold those two arteries.
Yeah. He was also, I believe, he was an ER physician too. Yeah, nice. It was the exposed artery, and he just, like you said, held pressure on it. And that's when you're working with extremity hemorrhages. That's what we're talking about. If you picture a blood vessel as just a tube, right? And there's two ways that we deal with compressible hemorrhage. One is you think of a garden hose, when you're a kid and you want to get a drink and you
fold it,
kink it in half. That's how a tourniquet works. It's the blood vessels running down in front of the bone. So you're exerting pressure against that tube to press it into the bone so that the blood stops right there, right? And the other way we treat it is, what's the other way you stop a garden hose when you're a kid? You put your thumb over the end, right?
Right.
So when you do a wound pack in an area that you can't get a tourniquet above the point of injury, so the axillary space or down in the inguinal fold or some buttocks, wherever.
Some place where you can't get something around it.
Exactly. You're going to do a wound pack, and that's just, you got the blood vessel that's severed inside of there, and you're getting pressure against that by pushing gauze into
filling it. Fill
exactly.
that hole so the blood can't go through.
Exactly.
And as tight as possible for that.
Yeah.
Some of those wound packs have medications or something that's built into them that helps coagulation or something.
Correct. Yeah. It's hemostatic.
Okay.
So depending on what brand you go with, they have different methods of action. So the most common one is combat gauze, and that's impregnated with kaolin. And it's a mineral, and so it doesn't cause a clot. It helps your blood to go through its natural clotting process. Okay. And there's a couple others, I think Celux, and I can't remember what the other one is off the top of my head. And they have an ingredient that actually forms a clot with them.
Okay.
And there's another company out of Oregon that has come up with these they look like almost little tiny sponges in a syringe. And they'll put that into the wound channel and then inject those, and they absorb the blood, and they'll expand and create the pressure inside of there. So pretty high speed
like the
stuff.
Little animals inside of a gelatin capsule when you're kids.
Uh-huh.
Good idea.
Totally.
Good idea, though.
Yeah.
It's stinking awesome, man.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And those are great because it's really challenging. When we do training, a lot of times we'll use a pig leg. Now I've got these. It's kind of saving the ham.
Right.
But when you make a narrow wound channel, it's really hard to get your finger in there and to get pressure into that. So that's where I can see a big benefit with those injectables in a narrow wound channel, because you have to get that pressure directly against the point of bleeding.
Tell us more about some of the stuff you have here.
This is just a couple of things we were going to look at. So that's with this is a wound packing trainer, and it's got different injury patterns inside of it. So when you do a wound pack, so if you can imagine somebody gets shot in, the axillary region here, or in their pelvis, and you're wanting to get pressure against that point of bleeding, the first thing you do is, and again, a lot of what we talk about also is being prepared with what you're willing to do and not willing to do. So that when you get in the scene and you say, yeah, I'm going to do this, you can just act. And you're not having to concern yourself with, well, do I really want to get exposed?
Decisions should be made before you come across it.
Yeah, and this can be, kind of hairy stuff. You come across a stranger that's got a bunch of blood coming out. Are you willing to intervene and get that on you? But when you are addressing a wound like this, so if we have a laceration, again, talking about to the axillary region, I don't want to go shove my finger in something where there's broken glass in there or anything like that. But if it's a clean cut and you can just take your finger and you're going to put it in there and feel what you've got initially for injury, and you want to feel for the pulse because that's where you want to start your pack at. So come in and it's going to be towards the head. So if you have an injury here, the pulse is going to be coming from that direction. If it's arterial, if it's venous, you're not going to feel a pulse, but it's going to be coming from the other direction. So you feel for that pulse, and if you find it, so then you're going to take your gauze, and this is just a regular gauze. The hemostatic dressings are fairly costly, but I would say it's definitely worth it. They usually run about $40-$50 on there. This stuff's $1 something each.
Well, the shelf life on those is probably quite a while.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. It's probably like 5 years or something like that. I'm not certain.
$50 every 5 years of your life, and you might save a life.
Exactly, and that's my mindset. Is it's a small investment for
sure,
kind of a critical venture. So you feel for the point of bleeding, and then you start your pack in there at that point. You can make, if you got a big enough wound channel, you start with a little ball, and then you go to that. I'm not going to rattle your table to death.
Oh, that's okay.
And you keep packing into it. Again, the advantage with this training model here is you can feel around, and I can watch them as they're performing the exercise and see if they're getting
they got the
into
gauze
it.
down in there and they actually touch the end of it.
Yeah, and one advantage of this over the pig leg is when they're done packing, I don't have to
unpack it to find out.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to come in and follow that wound channel, because especially with ballistic injuries, that wound channel can be down and up, changing angles.
The bullet changes its pattern once it hits things.
Exactly. So you want to get in there and feel for where you have to get to. And if that wound channel goes down and up, if you just pack straight into it, you're not going to get against that point of bleeding at all. So getting your finger down into that and training yourself to do that.
And you could be filling up another cavity or something like that with blood if you don't get it stopped clear down in there.
True. And if you don't get the pressure against that point of bleeding, it's just going to continue to bleed, and you'll see it soaking through. Whereas when you get it completely filled and you get pressure against that point of bleeding, you'll stop the blood flow.
Okay.
You can literally do that with just putting your finger against the point of bleeding. The first time I experienced, when I was going through paramedic school, I was at Vanderbilt University, or at the hospital, and this kid had fallen through a plate glass window and it laid open his radial artery. And so they bring the fire guy in here. He can hold pressure against this for a long time. Well, they got the vascular surgeon, and I was holding pressure against it, and it stopped the bleeding, and all was well. Well, that worked for about 5 minutes, and at about that time, I started seeing just a little bit of pulsation starting to come out again. So I switched hands. Well, that was great to about 10 minutes, and then it started pumping. And this female physician walked past and popped her head in. She said, "Hey, let me show you a trick." She said, "All the glass out of there?" "Yep." So just open it up and put your finger into it. So opened it up, put my finger into it, and bonk. All you're having to overcome is 120 millimeters of mercury pressure, which is nothing. And you can hold pressure against that.
Without all the muscle, fat, and skin in the way that was
exactly
wearing you out.
So when you think about the circumference of an extremity, and that bleed is down here, and you're pushing your force there, it wants to distribute, right? It wants to move away. Whereas when you get up against that thing, all of your force is going directly against the blood vessel, and you can compress it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is it the same principle if it's a through? If you have an exit wound, entry and exit, it's the same principle of sticking your finger in there?
So, Yeah. So if you had that opening here, because the blood vessel's running this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's that way and you have that opened, you could just push into it like that. It'd be better if you have a tourniquet to go above it, just because they're fast and very effective. Yeah.
Okay.
So that you're looking for where the bleeding's coming from, whatever extremity it's on. You're pointing to your arm right now because we're talking about that, but where the blood is coming out is the one you want to find and shut down.
Yep.
Yeah, mainly when you're reaching in there, you're looking for where the blood's coming from, like the vessel or whatever is spewing blood.
Cool.
Clog it.
Yep. In the Stop the Bleed campaign, we don't teach using towels and sheets and shirts and stuff, but they talk about using anything you can get in there to get pressure against that. But I think we get enough time with our students that we can show them a really effective, efficient way of doing it.
Tell us about the Stop the Bleed campaign. I haven't heard of the Stop the Bleed campaign before.
So it kind of, this may be assuming a lot on my part, but it was kind of associated with all the active shooter incidences that were going on. And they wanted a mass instruction to lay persons on how to stop bleeds because of the time frame that you have to intervene. Again, remember we were talking 3 to 4 minutes. This is the stuff that it's shop class. It's doing metalworking, woodworking, working with bandsaws, and so prone to injuries with that stuff. And again, in best case scenario, you call 911. You've got 3 minutes before you bleed out from that if it's arterial. If nobody has taken action on it, you have to be able to take care of yourself. But the Stop the Bleed campaign was getting that information and how fast people will bleed out. And I don't want to get too far off in the weeds, but all that research came out of Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, most people that die of preventable injury, or most people that die from injuries that could be prevented pre-hospital, are dying from extenuating hemorrhage from extremities. And we started initially throwing tourniquets at everything. We're like, if we carry a bunch of tourniquets, we're going to save everybody's life on these active shooter incidents. And there was a Hartford consensus study looked at what are people actually dying from in active shooter incidents, and it was almost zero from extremity hemorrhage until I think Pulse nightclub was the first, where they had multiple people that bled out from extremity bleeds, which is terrible. But most people that now is you have to address the torso, and they what's the reasoning for that? Well, in combat in the military, everybody's got they got full kit on. So what's exposed to the IED blast extremities. In the active shooter incidents, it's 10 meters or whatever the case may be, a lot.
Under 7 feet for the average problem with somebody shooting you.
Yeah, so devastating injuries that are hitting in the torso, mostly. But again, we are seeing now that it does happen. Like again, Pulse nightclub, I can't remember, it's like 6 or 7 people bled out.
Yeah, Miami, and there were a lot of victims, and
a lot.
It took a while to get people into the building because the shooters were still around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, tell people how they find your business.
You can go online, dynamicrescuesolutions.com.
Okay.
Probably the easiest way. I'm also on Instagram.
We'll put it up on the screen behind us, and I usually steal your logo and that kind of stuff.
Great. Yeah. It's and again, I've been training in the first responder sector for too long that I care to think about. Turn 50 tomorrow. So
I turned 50 in February.
Do you really? Hey. Yeah. Well, early happy birthday.
Class of 1989.
But we get into a lot more into areas like even keeping yourself calm and these type of things. A book I recommend to everybody's on combat. I know most law enforcement's read it, and military, it's required reading for a lot of officers and anybody that wants to learn how to perform in a high stress environment. We get into that as well. And then again, with the care of learning, even for the civilian sector, we don't have to get into, we don't get into needle decompression and surgical crikes and all that kind of stuff, which I do for the.
I gotta ask what the name of the book is, or everybody will message me.
Okay, On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it talks about with you how your heart rate, controlling your heart rate, will literally increase your abilities in high stress environments. So when you have a stress response to something and your body sends your heart rate up to prepare you for fighting, right? So about, I think it's 100 to 120 beats per minute is kind of like primed for guys. Like if you think about, a SWAT team about to make entry, you want that increased glycogen circulating into your body, so you're more aware of what's going on around you. You want a little, pupillary dilation, so you're taking a little more light and you can see better. And you're perfusing your muscles a little bit more. They're pre-oxygenated and ready for that fight. And when you start getting above, if you get too stressed out and your heart rate increases, is starting to where you get tunnel vision and you're not as aware of what's going on around you. You lose that fine motor skill coordination. Your thought process is greatly reduced to the point where you can either eventually it's just, shove or run, and you're unable to think clearly. Anyway, we touch on that a little bit.
Send them to you. You sell the gear and training, right?
Yeah, I sell the stuff just for convenience. Yeah, it's available. I sell like little iFax.
I'm literally going to post it to 125,000 people. Do you want them to come to your website?
I don't sell it on the website.
Okay.
I just sell it when we do the trainings. Make it available to them, and they can just buy it. And
so I'll talk to them about trainings, and if they come to a training, then they can buy stuff from you. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, and just to give you a little more background on my experience with this stuff, so I've been teaching that, and I'm also a certified tactical paramedic through.
Okay.
That means he's on the SWAT team.
So that means he's everything us old guys wish we could have been.
Out of curiosity, in the training, do you go over tracheotomies at all or block air passage at all?
I would. So if it's a civilian crowd, I will talk about that, and if you wanted to try it, I would let you try it. But I don't, just to prevent any kind of
malpractice type stuff.
Yeah,
because that's definitely getting to the realm of
Oh yeah. And then that's the well, I did it, and this guy told me I could do it.
Addison's 21. He has lots of interest in stuff.
Yeah, we started doing, and recently I started doing canine TECC. Found a bunch of great information and got together with a veterinarian that showed me, this is how you do this stuff, and it's bitching. There's no training available to the canine officers. It's really weird. It's this deep gray area. And veterinarians don't want the liability of coming in and teach just like that. They don't want to teach people to do this stuff. But canine officers since they technically own the dog, they can do anything with it.
We could get some members on that. And
I was just going to say,
they'll change the legislation.
We've got so many members on our page that would kill a human to save a dog.
Yeah, and that's so. I did a class for So Humane. And started researching it. And we did a class with PD years ago on TECC for canines. And I did a class recently, and it was supposed to be, 4? You have 5 guys?
4 or 5 guys, yeah.
Yeah, and then we got, Central Point PD heard about it, Grants Pass PD, and SO. We ended up with 14 canine officers. It was bitching. It was so much fun. It's such a cool class.
Nice.
Yeah.
Don't publish the date. That's the date to run drugs.
Thanks for tuning in to the Scanner Group Crowdsourced Crime and Safety Podcast with Ryan Mallory and Jared Banry from ThiefHunter Labs. Make sure to subscribe today for notifications about the next show. Visit us at www.thiefhunterlabs.com or on Facebook as Thief Hunter Labs in the search bar.